I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Renato Perez, who is a psychotherapist and counselor committed to guiding clients through a journey of self-improvement and self-discovery. He specializes in supporting clients through trauma and has extensive training and experience in the subject. As an LGBTQ plus affirmative therapist, he can support clients of any gender identity or expression. Renato, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's been so wonderful to hear all of your thoughts on drugs and specifically about mental health. So I have a little presentation that I would want to share. We're going to be focusing a lot on mental health and how to cope, right? One of the most interesting things that we get to understand is that everything that we do in life is it's a benefit to us, right? And sometimes the benefit is real, but sometimes is not good for us. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So let me put up my, are they gonna put up the slideshow? All right, and before I get started, again, my name is Renato Perez. I am a psychotherapist. My pronouns are he and they. And I wear a lot of hats in the community. So I'm a mental health therapist by evenings and nights and weekends. During the day, I work for a community agency where I support other therapists in training. And they, so as a clinical supervisor, I also teach at Pacific Oaks College for also for therapists that are in training, the gender and sexuality course and psychopathology. And the reason why I started to venture into mental health was because of my own journey with mental health. It was very challenging for me to grow up with my mom who had depression and who was very unavailable at some times in my life. And so I was taking that very personally, not understanding her journey, right? And so as we grow up, we get to choose how we cope with our mental health. And some of those choices are really beneficial, but some of those choices are not beneficial, right? And so we talked about the choices that we get, and drugs and alcohol are definitely choices that we have to cope with our mental health, to cope with depression, to cope with anxiety. Are they the healthiest? Not always, right? And most of the time they're not really. So I'm going to share a little bit about what is mental health, a little bit about what's anxiety, how to manage it, a little bit about what's depression, how to manage it, and a bunch of coping skills that we can use instead of utilizing drugs and alcohol. Okay. So mental health, it includes a bunch of different things, right? One of the most important things is our emotional, which is right here. A lot of us think about our emotions as in our heart or in our chest, like how do I feel, right? The other part would be psychological, which is my brain health. How is my brain functioning? Is the right chemistry functioning right? Do I have the right amount of hormones that are like running through my mind or through my body, right? And so sometimes it's not up to us. Sometimes our chemistry is a little off and it has nothing to do with any of the choices that we've done, simply the way that they are, right? And then the other one is social well-being. That means who's in our community, who is our support system, who is around us, do we have a healthy environment, are we growing up in a place that feels welcoming, are we growing up in a place that's dangerous, are we afraid to walk alone at night, anything like along those lines, right? So social well-being is how well do we feel supported by our community and the people around us, right? And things that contribute to our mental health, like I mentioned, is genes and brain chemistry. Genes are very important, right? So for example, like I shared, my mom has suffered from depression. So it's not for certain that I will be suffering from depression, but it's more likely that I will suffer from depression or that I would experience some depression in my lifetime, right? So already that gives me some information about who I am, like where my parents come from really shows up in my life, right? And like I mentioned before, also brain chemistry. It's very sad. It's some of the news that we hear about people that die of suicide, right? And one of the questions that always comes up with a lot of those celebrities that really have money, they have good families, they have everything, right? In quotes, it's that they still suffer from depression. And a lot of the times it's not really about something that happened to me, but more about my brain chemistry. My brain chemistry is not producing the right amounts of hormones or serotonin, like we've talked in earlier presentations. And so my brain chemistry is not sufficient to keep me or make me feel happy. And so medication is very important for those. A family history of mental health problems, like I mentioned, and life experiences such as abuse, trauma, or traumatic experiences, right? So another factor that is really important for us is if anything happens to us. So depression and anxiety often happens to us because something happened, right? There's a trauma event. A lot of us come from abusive households. A lot of us come from parents who were alcoholics. We saw a lot of violence. We grew up in dangerous neighborhoods. Some of us were sexually abused as kids. Some of us saw violent in our home. Some of us were ridiculed, bullied at school. So all of that really contributes to us as we grow up. And then we enter school, we grow up, we enter the work field, and we still continue to experience some trauma throughout our lives. So we get to cope with our traumas in different types of ways. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I know that the COVID-19 pandemic has been really shifting a lot of the things for us, and it really changed our mental health status or our mental health services, really. Um, I'll tell you from my own experience, right? As a therapist, I went from seeing maybe 20 clients to having a wait list of maybe 30 people that want services, that are looking for services. So that just tells you a lot about how the COVID-19 pandemic really affected our mental health, right? There are already like a lot of conversations about how the COVID-19 staying more at home, working from home has increased substance abuse, right? Especially at the beginning when there were people trying to cope with staying at home and changing a lot of things, there was a lot of consumption of alcoholic beverages, wine, and even cannabis, right? Like it skyrocketed the use. So we were coping, we were trying to manage. Was it the healthiest? Not really, right? So the good thing about mental health that it is treatable, right? There are results and there are things that we can do, and recovery is possible, right? So even if we've suffered from depression or anxiety at some point, some of us may have that forever, for our entire life. But treatment is real, and it really supports people, right? And like I mentioned, some of the evidence that I have is I myself went through periods of depression and anxiety that I was able to get support through psychotherapy that really supported my life, right? My mom today is doing way better. She's using medication that really supports her, as well as therapy, so including a lot of those things. And the last one, right, is self-care. Self-care is really important. And I'm going to have a whole bunch of things about self-care at the end. So I don't want to talk a lot about that. But self-care is the other component that is really important for us to be supported in our mental health. Okay, next slide. So depression, right? So when we talk about depression, right, usually there's a couple different things that we think about depression. Something happened in our life that caused us to be sad, right? Somebody died, my pet died, something really tragic happened in my life, something, it's an event that came up, right, for me, that's causing me to become depressed, right? And so some of those signs could be pains, headaches, cramps, problems, loss of interest in activities that I used to enjoy, including sex. If I were like really into soccer or anything like that, I would stop doing soccer. If I were an avid runner, I would stop running because it doesn't feel enjoyable anymore, right? The other side of depression, like I mentioned, is the chemical imbalance, right? Sometimes nothing really is happening in our lives. Everything seems to be okay. I just can't seem to get out of the bed, right? Trouble falling asleep or staying too much in bed, right? Wanting to take naps all the time. Any changes in my eating habits, whether I eat too much or not wanting to eat at all, thinking about suicide, or it doesn't even really have to be like I want to kill myself, But a lot of the times, suicide ideation really sounds more like, I just want to go to bed and not wake up, or the world would be so much better if I weren't here. This is so hard, I can't handle it anymore. I just don't want to be here anymore. That's how sometimes it sounds. It doesn't always sound like I'm going to do an activity to try to die of suicide or die from suicide, right? Experiencing feelings of guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, emptiness, right? It feels like nobody's here for me, even though there are people around me. Okay, so these are some of the signs of depression, right? Some of them are very internal, but some of them are very visible, right? And so when you are hanging out with people, you can also notice some of those things, right? You can always ask your friends, hey, I noticed some changes in you. Is everything okay? And really be there for them, really ask them, really be present for them, right? So we are able to connect in that regard, right? Next slide. Now, for anxiety, this is really interesting, right? Anxiety can happen for, again, multiple reasons, right? So the way that it feels is excessive worry. So me thinking a lot about certain things, difficulty sleeping or restlessness, a little very similar to depression, right? Fatigue, getting tired, having poor concentration. I can't concentrate at school or at work or even watching Netflix. I can't even pay attention to a show. Irritability and tension, right? I'm get really annoyed or really angry really fast. Some physical responses could be an increased heart rate, palpitation. Sometimes we think like something terrible is about to happen, right? Like a premonition. Other physical things would be like sweating or hot flashes, chest pain or shortness of breath. And a lot of us already have experienced a panic attack or an anxiety attack, right? And so feelings of terror, like something terrible is about to happen, I know for a fact, right? So the interesting thing about anxiety, no, it's okay, you can change it. The interesting thing about anxiety is that it's an important thing that we have to have, right? So anxiety or fear is just an alarm that we have. We all have it, and it's super important that we have it. So the best idea that we can, the best example that I can give you is, if I didn't have anxiety or I didn't have fear in my body as an alarm system, if I were to open my door in the morning and there's a lion out there and I have zero fear, I would just walk straight to the lion. What would happen to me? No questions about it. The lion's not going to be kind to me and play with me. They're going to eat me, right? I'm done, right? But thank God I have an alarm system in my body that allows me to create a response, which is the fight or flight response, that it works really fast. So my anxiety really allows me to think really quickly and say, I got to run away. I got to fight the lion. I got to play dead. I got to jump the fence. I got to do something to keep myself alive. So anxiety is just really alarm that we have to keep us alive. How beautiful is that, right? So the next time that you're feeling anxiety, instead of getting angry at your body, be like, oh, why am I feeling this way? I want you to do this. The first thing, your first response should be, thank you. Thank you for warning me that there's something happening in my world that you're perceiving as dangerous. The next thing that I want you to do is to look around to see if you're safe. And if you feel safe, you get to tell your body, it's okay, we're safe. I don't need to feel anxiety right now. Thank you for trying to keep me safe though. The other side of it is, if you are in danger, then listening to our anxiety is important, right? So that we are able to pay attention to what's going on. So that's the difference between having a full mind of anxiety, just a lot of things, a lot of information, and being mindful. Being mindful means that I get to pay attention to my surroundings, that I get to understand that if I am in danger, I get to create a plan. I get to make a change, right? For me to feel safer, for me to be a little bit better off, okay? Another way that we can control some of our anxiety, and this is really interesting, right? So there are things that we can control, and there are things that we can't control. I'm sure you've all seen some of this variation of the circle of control, right? In the inner circle, we have the things that we can control. And in the outside, all of the things that I get to let go of, right? They don't belong to me. I can't change them. So for example, things that I can control are create my attitude, right? If I get really anxious about like what I'm seeing on social media, I get to limit my social media intake. I get to treat myself with kindness, right? If somebody's really irritating to me, I get to keep my distance as much as I can, right? Things that are not outside, that are not in my control, for example, that I get to, whatever other people do, I can't control them, right? But I can control myself. I can control like whether I can be like go to my room and not talk to anybody. I get to say I don't want to interact. I get to hang up the phone. I get to turn off social media, but I can't control what other people do or say, right? So those are some of the things that I can utilize to kind of like understand what are some of the good thoughts that I can create. So what are real lions are the things that I can control, right? I can run away from them or I can move them. What are fake lions, right? I don't have any control over them. The interesting thing when we experience trauma is that, let's say that we live in a place that it's infested with lions. And every time I open my door, there's lions. And everywhere I go, there's lions. So I'm always on the lookout, right? I'm always like watching myself because it's dangerous. It's a dangerous place to live. But then all of a sudden, I get transplanted and they move me to a new place. No more lions, lion free. But the interesting thing is that my body's not going to be like, oh, yeah, we're good. Let's just walk around and we're safe. My brain is going to still tell me, hey, watch out. There's still going to be some lions out there. So I'm still going to control cautious. I'm still going to walk around being careful because I'm so scared. And it's going to take me a long time for my body to allow myself to relax. So that is what happens when we come from a household of trauma, right? Or violence or abuse of alcoholism, right? We are living in a place full of lions. And then we get ourselves into a safer space and we're saying like, well, what's going on? Like I'm good now. I should feel no more anxiety and depression, but my body's not ready. So I get to process it all. I get to be kind to myself. And every time you feel that anxiety, you get to say, thank you for trying to keep me safe. I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I love you. Thank you for protecting me. But right now, there's no more lions. There's actually really nice people around me. There's a lot of beautiful things that I can enjoy. And I get to focus and be mindful of the things that are around me. Okay. So this is the most important part of the presentation. So if you were like zooming off, this is the important part, right? So these are the 5 pillars of self-care, which is, this is how we get to come back to a place where we feel safe, right? So the first one, right, and is spiritual healing, right? And you don't have to believe in God or anything at all. Spiritual healing could be just connecting with the universe, connecting with Mother Earth, getting in contact with a tree or anything, the wind, and just allowing yourself to be connected. Some of the ways that you can do spiritual healing could be through prayer. It could be through just sitting outside in nature, right? Being connected to Mother Earth, to the universe, feeling the universe. Meditation is a beautiful way of spiritual healing, right? If you practice any religion, chanting, prayers, any of that really supports. The other one is physical health. Now you get to check in with yourself. You have your own body. So I'm not here to tell you like what you should do and you should all do CrossFit or run a marathon, right? You get to know your own body and say, my body's able to do stretches in the morning. And that's it. My body's able to do yoga. Amazing, do yoga. But be mindful that these 5 things, these 5 pillars are not just for sometimes. These are unquestionables. These are things that we get to do every single day for ourselves to be connected and well-rounded, right? So physical activity is really important. There's a beautiful quote that I really enjoy that says, If you can't take it anymore, then give. Being of service is another of those pillars, right? To being able to support, to help. And it doesn't mean that you have to give everything that you have to support others. You get to be on your own limits, right? And sometimes being of service is saying that you look good today. Sometimes being of service is saying thank you and being kind to others, right? If you are able to do more things, amazing. If you're able to support an organization, amazing, right? The other one is practice joy. We get so disconnected with everything that brings us joy because we have to work, we have to do schoolwork, we have to go to other things, and we forget that the real reason, and this is a little controversial, the only reason actually that we're on this earth and is to be happy. That's it. You were not put in this place to be suffering or to be in a place that doesn't love you back. You get to love yourself. So practicing joy so focusing on the things that you really enjoy. You like running, go run. If you like drawing, draw. If you like your work, focus on working, right? All of the things that you enjoy, do them, practice them. It's so funny that there's an activity that says, make a list of all the things that you really, really enjoy. And then make another list of all the things that you have to do in your day-to-day life. And then it says, compare them. Why does your joy list not reflect your day list, right? We have to change that. We got to really practice a little bit more joy and bring those things that really make us happy. That's why we're here, to be happy and to be enjoying ourselves. And the last one, of course, is mental wellness, right? Mental wellness can mean a lot of things, right? Therapy is a beautiful thing. I recommend it, but it's not the only thing, right? Mental wellness can be journaling, right? Getting everything out, being able to have that conversation with yourself. It could be also meditating, taking moments of silence. Mental wellness could be creating really healthy, beautiful boundaries that I know that we've talked about earlier on, right? Learning how to say no to things that you don't want to do, creating safe spaces for yourself. And of course, checking in with friends, talking about how you feel, being honest about your emotions, okay? I have a list here of 100 different ways that you can practice self-care. So there's no excuse for us to not do self-care, right? There's little tiny ones and there's huge ones, right? I know that the famous ones is like putting on a face mask or taking a long bath, but there's a whole bunch of other things like laughing. Like one of my favorite things to do is when I'm feeling a little sad is I go on YouTube and I Google cats and they just do silly things and they make me smile and that's it. Like I just feel a tiny little bit better, right? I get to be really honest with myself. If I'm feeling sad, I'm not going to put a sad song to make me sadder, right? That's like digging in the wound. I'm going to put a song that lifts me up and creates a little bit of shift in my life, right? Taking time to be in nature, to do deep breathing, which is really, really important. Okay. So I hope that you all can take a look at those 100 and one of those, I hope that sticks to you, right? And then maintaining positive mental health, right? And this is just for forever, for us to be able to practice in our day-to-day life, right? Staying connected with friends is really important. We can provide emotional support. You know who those friends are. We get to create those boundaries with people that that are not so healthy for you, right? And so we get to create distance with those people. But there are some people that are really great at listening or that are really great at providing emotional support, again, and I'm going to repeat this again, engaging in physical activity every single day. I'm not saying run a marathon. I'm not saying go to the gym. Do something physical. Go for a walk. Going out for a walk, especially right now that the days are like this little and we only have this amount of like sunlight. Go out for a little tiny walk, 5 minutes. That's okay. Just go out for 5 minutes and walk around, get a little bit of sunlight, that already lifts up your spirit, right? And again, if you're doing, but this physical activity has to be participating every single day. Saying no to new responsibilities when your plate is full. There are some of us that are people pleasers, right? And we have very hard time saying no to anybody, especially the people that we love, especially to our parents or to people that we care, or partners or lovers, whoever. And we have a hard time saying no. And so it's okay for us to be able to say, like, you know what, right now, I don't have the capacity. You don't have to say more than that. And being able to create spaces where you're able to say, like, you know, my day is pretty full because I want to balance the things that I have to do, which is, I don't know, work, school, etc., etc. But I also want to include fun things for me. Maybe going for a walk, maybe playing with my dogs, maybe watching Netflix, maybe doing some other activities. And if my day is full, even if those activities sound lazy, those are my activities. If a nap is very important to you, it's very important to you, and it's recharging you. You get to say, yeah, my nap is important to me, and I'm gonna say no to whatever other activity you're inviting me, right? The other one is getting enough sleep. Sleep is very important, and I can't even stress this enough. A lot of the how do I say it? One of the things that really allows us to see whenever there's any mental health concerns is whether we are changing our sleeping pattern, right? If we're sleeping too little and we're having way too many thoughts in our mind, maybe there's a little bit of anxiety that's rising up, right? If we're sleeping too much, we don't want to be present, we're trying to avoid, there might be some chances that we are getting a little bit depressed. So being really watchful of your sleeping pattern is really important. If you're having a hard time sleeping, this is important, right? Create a sleeping routine that really works for you. You know, one of the things that we are all guilty is having our phones. The very last minute that we go to bed is like me watching my phone, right? So we got to release it at least 30 minutes before we go to bed. We get to unwind, you know, do the things that create a really beautiful place for you to sleep. Drink a little bit of tea, you know, nothing with caffeine. Drinking more milk, you know, washing your face, your teeth, you know, dimming the lights, maybe putting soothing music, lighting a candle. You know, it sounds like a lot. But if you're struggling with sleeping, it's actually really important, and it's really beneficial, and it's worth it for us to take our time and do those kinds of activities for us. Creating a sleeping hygiene routine is really important. Okay. And then the last one is seeking mental health from a professional, right? When it becomes too overwhelming. It's really important for us to understand that it's okay for us to ask for help. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. We're not alone. And sometimes we make ourselves feel alone. But if we reach out, if we tell people, they'll reach back out. Okay. One of the things that I always think about before you diagnose yourself with anything in general, with anxiety, depression, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, anything, check yourself and ask yourself, am I drinking enough water? Am I sleeping enough? Am I eating healthy food? Am I, what was the other one? Am I doing physical movement? Am I doing activities throughout the day? And then the last one is, am I hanging out with people that are making me upset? Or am I hanging out with people that are bringing me joy, right? Our surroundings are really important. So watch who you're hanging out with, right? It's important for us to recognize that sometimes being around not healthy people for us could really mess up with our mental health. And I'm not saying people are bad, right? I don't think that there's good and bad people, but you know, sometimes they're bad for us at this moment, or sometimes they're going through a really difficult time that we're not able to be present for them, and it's okay for us to create some distance. Okay, these are just some resources that I wanted to create here. So in case you are thinking of seeking mental health services, or you are having suicidal ideation, these are some of the resources that you can use. All right. So for 24/7 help, you can call the suicide helpline at 800-854-7771. There's also, if you don't want to talk to anybody, but you are okay with texting, there's a text line that you can call. You can text 741-741, and you'll be able to chat with someone that will support you. If you're looking for mental health services near your area and you're in Los Angeles County, you can dial 211, and they can try to support you in finding a mental health agency, right? And also the National Alliance for Mental Illness is NAMI, which is supportive for people with illnesses and for families who have illnesses, right? For family members that have illnesses. Okay. And I think that is it. I think the next slide is just questions, right? I'm here to answer any questions or any comments that you may have. And I love
Thank
to
you.
see the chat room that was so active. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Renato, for sharing these coping mechanisms with us. I know sometimes we take these for granted, but they're extremely like grounding and helpful when we find ourselves in situations, or just like you said, in everyday life. So I think it's also very important to keep practicing these mechanisms to be able to like hone them, because it definitely is like work that we must continuously do. But for sure, let's open the chat up for some questions. Let's give it a few minutes. Are you currently taking any clients?
I am. I do have a wait list, so but I always welcome the calls, right? So if you have any questions, you can always contact me. And my contact information was on the last slide. You can always contact me. I would love to chat with you, create a conversation with you. And if I'm not the right fit for you, or I don't have the room, I will find someone for you. I'll try to support you in finding another therapist that does have the space.
I have a comment from Jennifer, not a question, but I just wanted to say thank you. And what you said is very true.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for listening, right? And the Renato Perez LCSW is my Instagram. I'm pretty active in social media. So if you ever have any questions, just hit me up there as well, and I'll try to respond as well.
I
I
just
did.
want to say, oh, sorry, Miguel. I just wanted to say you should follow Renato on Instagram. I do, and I get to see his stories and his TikToks, which are fantastic. And they're very educational when it comes to mental health. So definitely check those out.
Thank you. That was one of my challenges, right? To not be so serious about mental health and to allow myself to be silly and to be okay with laughing about myself. So TikToks really supported that. And I always try to bring them back to mental health and how do I share a lot of coping skills through that. And so it's useful to be there.
I did want to ask, like, are there any resources maybe at the top of your head that you can suggest to maybe Spanish speaking folks, like maybe our parents, older relatives?
Yeah, I mean, resources, there are a lot of agencies that do have like therapists that speak Spanish. I myself, I am bilingual, and there's a lot of therapists that are bilingual. If you're looking specifically for therapy, there's Latinx therapy or therapy for Latinx, which is another one, which are both ¿cómo se llaman? Search engines where you can find therapists that are Latinx or that speak Spanish, right? If you're looking for more resources, there's a bunch of podcasts that I really enjoy. I myself have a podcast that it's called the Luis and Renato podcast, and it's in Spanish. It's all in Spanish, and we talk about just mental health. We bring a lot of guests that we deal a lot with their traumas and how they kind of like manage it and kind of like their mental health journey, which is also another resource that are parents that have a little bit more of a separation from therapy they're having a hard time. Listening to other people's experience may get them to soften up before they start looking into services themselves.
It looks like Angel has a question. So Angel, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Thank you, Stevie. Thank you so much, Renato, for all of your information. I just had a quick question because, I mentioned that mental health is often stigmatized in my family, especially therapy. Like a lot of it took me a while to kind of get into counseling because, like my parents would always say, like, you just need to stop being stressed and stuff like that. And they often, kind of have a negative perception of therapy, that like only crazy people go into it. So like, how can someone kind of overcome those conversations where, therapy is always looked down upon or
Mhm.
always seen as a bad thing for our mental health?
Yeah, and it's been a struggle in our community, right? I think a lot of our parents still have that perception that therapy is only for crazy people, and then they even confuse psychiatry with mental health or with therapy, right? So I think just talking about it with our family is really important. So creating conversations, I love that, especially for the younger generations. I think it's becoming such normalized topic that even like artists are talking about like their therapy journey, right? And so I think the only thing that we can do, we can't force them, right? The only thing that we can do is talk about it, talk more about it. If you're already going to therapy, talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your parents. This is what I learned in therapy, this is how it's supporting me, this is the things that I'm learning through therapy. um Having conversations around that. If you know somebody that they admire, bring it up. Do you know that your favorite singer is going to therapy as well, and they're getting services as well? It's silly, but it really helps and supports their understanding, not only culturally, but I think also our and I'll tell you from my personal experience, religion played a huge part on my mom's aversion to therapy. She's like, no, that's not something that we do. We always just trust God, and that's the only one that can create us. But I also think that there are changes and shifts, and even in religion, and in church, they already are bringing up a lot of like topics about mental health in there, in normalizing therapy as well. So slowly but surely, but talking about it really supports like that journey.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad you shared a little bit about like, religion, because I definitely see that with my family. Like, you just gotta trust God. And
Yeah.
I definitely do see that change in, my community church, where they're saying that, it's important to take care of your mental health, and here are some resources to guide you to that. So thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Renato, we do have one last question from Veronica. How would you guide a youth who is struggling with a parent with current substance abuse that does not recognize how destructive it is to the family?
This is a really difficult question, right? Did you all watch that movie Aladdin? When Aladdin rubs the lamp and the genie comes out, and the genie says, I can grant you any wish that you want, except I can't bring anybody back from the dead. I can't make anybody fall in love with you, and I can't grant you more than 3 wishes, right? I really do think about that as a way of understanding that we can't change anybody, right? It's not in our power to change anybody, right? And so we get to take care of ourselves. We get to create healthy boundaries, and we get to create spaces for us that feel healthy. If my parent is not recognizing that they have a problem with alcohol or with any substance, I get to create a space between me and them, right? I get to say, like, listen, I think you need the support. I'm here for you if you need it, but I also need to take care of myself and create some distance. And it's really hurtful. And it's almost something that we have ingrained in our system, and could be culturally, right? Because it feels like we're abandoning them. It feels like we're not letting, but we are not, right? We're saying, I'm here for you. I want to help you. There's an issue with you. There's a problem that I would love for you to get support, but I can't be here and pick up the pieces every single time, because it's dangerous for everybody, right? Some of the people that use substances can become violent or aggressive when they're under the influence. You're at risk. And so I want you to think about like yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a resourceful way. Like the way, if you keep yourself alive and well, you can be more supportive to others, but you can't change them. They'll be able to do the change when they want to do the change, right? There's a lot of resources. You can send them to rehab, you can send them to therapy, but if they're not ready and they don't want to create a change, they will not create a change.
Wow, thank you so much. One thing I do want to include something that Veronica shared with us as well, which I thought was really important. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, Veronica. I remember you telling us, we can't carry our parents' burden. We can only provide them with the resources, like Renato said. But anything other than that, we need to kind of like really focus on healing ourselves from that and not carry their burden with us, because that's only going to burden other people and the people in our lives.
Yeah, Renato, thank you. That was absolutely amazing. And it's always, if you bring me joy. I just gotta say, you are one of my pieces since COVID. And I shared with you a couple of times how I personally started experiencing anxiety episodes throughout COVID. And it was hard for me, right? Because being the single mom, the head of the household, from my family always seeing me like this strong person to now like, wait, what's going on with her? But I did realize that one of the things that we spoke with Miguel and Stevie about the other night was, I don't want my children to carry burden that's not theirs, right? My divorce, my father's alcoholism, my uncle's death to, alcohol abuse, to all of this trauma that has been generationally carried over. I say it stops with me, right? I say it stops now. Emotional abuse, physical abuse, just trauma overall that our family feels that when they come here that we have to be responsible for everybody's well-being. It's like my therapist tells me, who made you? Like who told you have to carry all this burden? So today, I think, Renata, one of the things that I love that you shared so much about is that you say that we are only here to care for us, right? And we are here to be able to say, today is a new day. We start. We have a new day to start. Embrace. I love that through you and your support through social media helped me in my times when I was like, wait, what's going on with my body? I can't control it. And instead of fearing it and being angry, accept it. And culturally, it was hard because my family couldn't figure out why I wasn't that put together as I always have been. But I think from a family's perspective, to see how both my sons have grown through this experience, myself, and being vulnerable, coming out here and speaking about this, I obviously had both my boys' permission to talk about it. It's not culturally accepted to tell you, go out there publicly and say, hey, my father was an alcoholic. There's alcohol abuse in my family. There was physical abuse in my family. But I think that that's part of our story, right, Renato? That when you can step up and own it and show my kids that, there's a part of that vulnerability and that story, and that who I was doesn't define me. Things don't define me. Social media doesn't define me. Even me losing my business during COVID because of all shutdown didn't define me. It's who I am in my heart, and that's who we are. So.
Thank you, Veronica. Yeah, your words are really moving, and I really appreciate, everything that you do for that community also as well. But yeah, you're totally right. Our families are, I always think about the privileges that we have just by being born somewhere, right? Or the disadvantages that we get for being born in another place, right? Some of us are born citizens. Some of us are immigrants. We didn't have any control over that. Some of us were born in households of alcoholics. Some of us were not. Some of us were born in like wealthy families. Some of us were not. We have zero control over that. That has nothing to do with who I am, my value as a person, or anything at all in my life. So all of that, although it is part of my history, has nothing to do with who I am. I get to recreate, I get to, like a Pokemon, I get to evolve and be able to say, like, this is me now, and I get to own it. I understand my history. It's part of who I was. That's where I was born, but it doesn't define me. That's a beautiful journey to have, right? We get to rename ourselves. We get to be who we are, and we get to live a life full of joy, which is important, right? Every single day, we get to reshift and rechange. And shit's going to happen every day, but we always get to be like, a new challenge. Let's see what happens. Taking everything from a place of curiosity instead of a place of defeat. Let's see what happens now. Let me see what I can do with this big old problem. right?
That's awesome. I just want to thank you, Renato and Veronica, for sharing this space with us.